Hello everyone, I hope you have enjoyed your break. It is a pleasure to welcome you for this third presentation of our session on healthcare and optimization. My name is Barbara Decel and I am the Health Research Advisor at IVADO. I will be the moderator for this presentation. Before to welcome André Diamant that will talk about AI, operation research and healthcare, I'd like to remind you a few considerations. First, this presentation will last 20 minutes. Secondly, I will be the timekeeper. Each presentation is followed by a question and answer period of 5 minutes. I would like to remind you that there is no audio interaction on the platform. So you can ask your questions in the question tab on the right side of the screen between chat and poll tab. I will moderate them at the end of the presentation. Also, I encourage you to vote for the questions that most appeal to you, as I will prioritize the questions with the most votes. Finally, the presentations are recorded. You will have access to them after completing the satisfaction survey that you will receive by mail at the end of the day. So now it is with a great pleasure that we will hear André Diamant, CEO and founder at GrayOS Oncology Solutions. He will talk about how can operations research, AI and clinical expertise be married to improve hospital logistics. André, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara, for the introduction, and to IVADO for the opportunity to speak today, and of course to you all for your interest. I'm not actually seeing. There we go. Here are my slides. So as Barbara introduced, my name is André Diamant. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Gray, based in Montreal, and what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is kind of our journey from a couple of years ago when we started to now, and how we married sort of these three different disciplines, being operations research, artificial intelligence, and then clinical expertise, ultimately in order to improve hospital logistics. So a little bit about myself and kind of where I came from, to give a bit of background context. I actually started in physics. And before I went into this degree, it was entirely a choice between either physics or medicine, sort of the fork in the road, which way do I go? I ended up determining I wanted to go into physics at that time. But then when I was looking to see what I wanted to do with my life back when I was 22 or 23 years old, I found this degree called medical physics, which I had never heard about. And this immediately seemed like the obvious choice for me to go into, so I did. And I was very quickly radicalized towards the idea of precision medicine. Specifically, how can we treat a patient more like an actual individual and really personalize their care for them? As you can probably imagine, this used a whole lot of artificial intelligence to do. It was kind of right in that time. And then I continued that master's degree into a PhD, where I continued about much of my work. So both my master's and my PhD were surrounding the topic of how can we use a bunch of pre-treatment information, specifically medical images, so CTs, PETs, MRIs, put those all together along with tumor characteristics like the size, radiomics, if you're familiar with the term, and then effectively determine whether the standard of care is going to work or not for a specific patient. If I were to continue along the academic route, I was going to start to flip that on its head, and instead of using pre-treatment information to determine whether a treatment would or would not work, actually craft the ideal treatment based on pre-treatment information. But to make a long story short, and instead of continuing in academia, I chose the entrepreneurial route and started Gray with a few other colleagues. And really, the company was born off of a desire to create a healthcare ecosystem that really has no wasted resources, whether that resource is patient's time or staff time or machine utilization, really just making sure that we're optimally using everything. And this also applies to data, as you can probably imagine. So overall, one of our goals is how can we improve oncology workflows using operations research, artificial intelligence, and clinical expertise. And as I'll get a bit into, the clinical expertise component is very critical to actually build a tool that isn't just an impressive piece of technology, but also can be clinically applicable. So you can see here, this isn't the entire team. The team is about 13 people strong now. This is more sort of just a highlight of both the founders and the various disciplines that we really tapped into. So myself and Marc-André Renaud both have PhDs in medical physics. Jan Sinchins, Nadia Lerici, and Louis-Martin Rousseau are all professors ranging from healthcare logistics to operations research to medical physics in Jan's case. And then about a year ago, we brought on Raphael as a product manager who is professionally trained as a pharmacist. So again, really trying to round out the team with a variety of various skill sets. So a bit of the context that kind of led us to here. The first is just the increase in cancer incidence. It's a known fact that over the next couple of decades, cancer incidences are going to continue to skyrocket due to a number of various socioeconomic factors. And the system really just as it is isn't efficient enough to handle that incoming wave. In the best case, it's going to require significant scaling up of capital, which of course, if we can find ways to handle this without having to do that, that's always preferable. There's an increase in complexity of cancer treatments. This is, again, the advent of technology. Lots and lots of research has led to superior ways to treat cancer, but often those ways come with added complexity, whether it's the resources on a personal level or a physical level that are required. And then there's just unforeseen events, the pandemic being the elephant in the room, and one of the sort of bittersweet events that kind of kickstarted the company can also have a detrimental impact on staff and patients, as we've all seen over the past 2 years. So through this current situation, hospitals are looking for ways that they can empower how their teams manage the schedule, whether how they fit patients in, how they handle all of their resources while facing a challenging operating environment so they can continue to ensure access and quality of care for all of their patients. So again, to reiterate, our goal here is how can we bring intelligent real-time optimization to the oncology workflow? And to sort of highlight a few of the specific elements that we try and touch on, it's about improving resource utilization, reducing the administrative burden, improving staff satisfaction by augmenting their ability to do their job with technology, and then reducing patient wait times and getting them in and out of the door faster. And all of this is using a combination of those three key disciplines that I've mentioned over and over again. So at a very macroscopic level, our solution is called GrayOS. We think of it as an operating system for healthcare. And how it works in a nutshell is we take historical data from the center, so from the past few years of appointments, and we use this to build a virtual model of the center itself. And then that virtual model is constantly optimizing those real-time logistics, which subsequently is flowing back into the model to reinforce its behavior. This provides a command center of sorts, which automates and optimizes the scheduling process. It can deal with bottlenecks because cancer is a very sequential type of disease that requires multiple silos that need to be one after the other. Let's say if you have surgery and radiation, typically you're going to need the surgery before the radiation. And if you're not looking at those together, it's not going to work out very well. And then just real-time optimization. We've all seen, whether it's our own schedules or medical schedules, you can make a schedule in the middle of the day and it might look great, but then by the evening, it's a disaster because everything is falling apart. So the ability to do this in real time is critical as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to speak about both medical oncology and radiation oncology. Those are the two silos that we currently operate in, and then we connect them. But the problems within and the problem and the corresponding solution within each of these silos is very different. Very similar, but they're very different. So in medical oncology, we have the situation where we're trying to match multiple resources. You'll have, let's say, 80 patients that are coming in for that day, all of which have various complexities of treatment, various durations of treatment, various drugs needed. And then you're going to have, let's say, 14 chairs and 8 nurses. And the problem is this kind of multi-dimensional game of Tetris of fitting nurses to chairs, nurses to chairs, and patients to chairs at the same time. And there's a lot of complexity to this that uses both OR and AI to solve. As one example I can give you is, there's very obvious constraints, things like a nurse can't start multiple patients at the same time. For them to set the patient up in their chair, they can only do that one at a time. But a nurse can see and be responsible for multiple patients at the same time. However, it's not as simple as just saying they can see, let's say, 4 or 5 patients at a time. Every single patient also has varying degrees of complexity. It's called acuity, which is where the clinical expertise side comes in, and AI in order to predict this acuity, where one patient might be particularly sick. So the workload on a nurse and the burden on a nurse enables that nurse to only see 2 patients at a time versus another patient who you might be able to see, another nurse who could see 4 or 5. It's kind of like if we think of an emergency room as an analogy. If you have someone who has a minor cut that is bleeding quite a bit, and then you have someone with a headache and maybe somebody with a cough, one nurse could probably handle those 3 patients, but you're not going to put one nurse on someone with a broken femur, kidney stones, and a hemorrhaging wound. Those are things that require a bit more attention. So it's very, very similar in medical oncology, and this has to be done on a daily basis. In radiation therapy, the situation is a little different. Radiation therapy is delivered in what are called fractions. So a patient will receive anywhere from 5 to 30 fractions. And those are all appointments that must be spread out and again, obey specific rules. Maybe they have to be 1 day apart or 2 days apart. That's going to depend on the particular prescription that the radiation oncologist prescribes. So here, what we're looking to do is schedule this entire care plan, that's the terminology we use, over multiple days while we're still meeting all of these various constraints. So the hospital has its constraints. It has what's already on the calendar. It has when are the physicians available? What are the operating hours? Can those ever be broken? Can we treat overtime? You have the patient who has a whole bunch of characteristics. They have a preference that we'd like to be able to take into account. They have a complex care plan that has all of these nuances to it. So what we do is we then take those things, we spit them into our box, which we try to make not a black box, but a gray box, pardon the pun, and output a schedule. And this schedule is trying to optimize all of those goals we spoke about a few slides ago, where the patient is being treated as quickly as possible and the resources in the hospital are being used as efficiently as they possibly can be. So what is this actual tool? It's ultimately a scheduling tool and a control tower. The scheduling tool finds the best treatment schedule with all of these various constraints, and the control tower gives this real-time view of the entire department to kind of monitor what's going on, monitor the health, and support strategic decision-making that the administrative staff or the managers are going to be making. And it really has multiple stakeholders within the environment, whether it's a department manager who really wants robust schedules, or a booking clerk who wants to reduce their stress and their burden just with their day-to-day job and have a tool that will help them to schedule patients efficiently and is able to adjust to the day-to-day variety. So one element that I wanted to speak on was the collaboration with clinical teams. And I mentioned right at the start how this is critical in order to have a tool that is actually usable. And first off, this means co-creation from the beginning. We were very fortunate to have the SHUM as our partner. And this was even really before a line of code was written. So that enabled us to really build this software with the users. So every step of the way, we were taking their feedback into account and making sure from their clinical expertise that their needs were actually translated into a usable solution, as opposed to us just building something that theoretically looks great. This was done in very, very short iterative cycles. So, we're still in contact with them every single week, but at the start, this was every day or two. We would be speaking with them to understand the situation and the environment more in depth. And then even through deployment, it's a similar concept. This isn't the type of software that we deploy and then walk away. This is something that has a very personalized approach where we're continuing to work with our users to make sure it's fitting those needs and it's adapting how they'd like it to adapt and need it to adapt. And then we're helping the hospitals accommodate change management, because the reality to this type of technology and another reason why clinical expertise is so critical here is there are challenges within a hospital setting that are not actually addressable purely with technology. It requires a human element, and it requires humans to change rather than just kind of using artificial intelligence to fix everything. That doesn't work. And what we've realized is that even though there are certain problems here that may not be directly addressable by the technology, we can help facilitate the human change. So the tool acts both as a piece of technology that can directly provide value using sophisticated algorithms, but also can help these systems improve for the better and ultimately transform the way that they're delivering care. So where I want to close is kind of the overarching vision of the company here. And that's this idea of a very unified healthcare platform. And what I've shown in this image is all of the data flowing through the various silos. So you have your physician appointments, imaging, testing, surgery, radiation therapy, the infusion clinic, and then keeping the patient in the middle of it all. And I mean taking this a step further than just the data literally being connected. Because often you'll have a piece of software, centers have something called an EHR, electronic health record, where this data will be stored. But I mean taking it a step further and actually harnessing that data, harnessing the fact that it is all connected to each other, and ultimately using that connection and interoperability to optimize the way that care is delivered. And this can range all the way from the logistics, as we're doing right now, to our future ambition of stepping into the clinical decision support realm, where we're kind of going back to my roots of my PhD and using this information that's flowing through all of these various silos to ultimately help determine the best actual treatment for a specific patient. So I'd like to thank you all again for your time and IVADO for the opportunity. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot, André, for this very insightful presentation. I have one question for you. So you mentioned the fact that it is very important to involve users and to have a short cycle to deploy successfully your platform. So basically, how do you mobilize users? Do you succeed in that step that is very critical?
Yeah, so the short answer is it's a challenge, and your mileage may vary for every different hospital because they're all unique and they all have different individuals. But the bottom line to us and what we found is most successful is twofold. The first is making sure that we're clearly communicating the value to every individual. So it's a lot harder to convince people to spend their time when they're already very busy on something that there is literally no reason why they care. And making sure that we can clearly communicate that this will make your life easier, or this is going to allow your patients to have a better quality of life. Those aspects is very, very important. The second one is going along the same lines of communication, but as transparency, coming off as genuine and building a relationship with these individuals where we're not just like a used car salesman trying to get in and get out, but we really see our users almost as an extension of our team. And kind of that perspective, and going back to the clinical expertise side, having experience in a clinical environment so we almost speak their language and can build that relationship and build that rapport, as opposed to just kind of talking the talk but not walking the walk.
Thanks for sharing your vision. So your solution at the present time is used in oncology. So do you think to expand your solution to other area in a hospital or for different pathology?
Yeah, it's certainly. So our overarching vision, if anybody caught it, is a healthcare ecosystem that has no wasted resource. So that doesn't stay within cancer. That being said, we are within oncology now, and there's a number of business reasons for that, and that's where our background is. It's of course a very, very large problem, with cancer being one of the leading causes of death everywhere and one of the most complex workflows. But we won't be stopping here. Really, the idea is to expand out of oncology into a hospital and really helping orchestrate patient flow through a hospital, and then even taking it a step further and orchestrating patient flow through an entire network of hospitals, clinics, what have you. And that's kind of, you can imagine moving from your family doctor to a specialized radiologist for a diagnosis scan to the hospital for care to follow-up care, and having all of these steps within the same environment, both for the patient's benefit and for the system as a whole. So I don't know when that will happen, but certainly that's the plan in the midterm.
So you mean that you should be capable, in a long-term perspective, maybe to follow the patient, or the citizen, through his whole path to the healthcare system?
Exactly. That's the idea. And
Amazing.
be able to project to the patient what, and this is where AI only comes more and more into this technology, project what their trajectory is actually going to look like. So if you have a scan and it comes out positive for this specific form of cancer, we can then project, including like a timeline of how busy and how overflowing or not is the system. We anticipate that you would have surgery at this stage, maybe chemo here, maybe radiation here, and then follow up down the line to be able to give this, I don't want to say peace of mind, but to make sure that the patient can trust their provider and it's always connected, and just ensuring communication is as good as it can be.
Thank you. So now a question from Hubert Gaucher. Will you be integrating treatment outcomes to GrayOS in order to generate patient-specific medicine data banks?
Yeah, so that's there's sort of two axes that we intend to expand on in the mid to long term. One is what I just spoke about in terms of outside of oncology into other physical locations. The second is on the clinical decision support side, where we incorporate outcomes. And then that's when you really start to marry clinical decision support with operations research, where we're no longer just saying that this is the ideal treatment, but we're also saying this may be the ideal treatment, but you can't get this treatment for 3 weeks. So maybe there's this slightly inferior treatment from a purely clinical perspective, but we can give it to you tomorrow. And then it will be up to the physician and the patient and the family and the support team to work together to make a decision. And that isn't possible until you have a system that is able to really understand the operations of the hospital at any given time. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thanks. So next question from Philippe Jouvet. So what kind of data do you need to develop search tools? So I guess it refers to the question not the one just before, but the one maybe about having an holistic view of the patient trajectory.
Yeah, so right now we're not a medical device, and all of the information that we require is non-medical in nature. So it's effectively logistics and appointments and type of appointments. And we're able to do what we do in the present off of that. Once we start getting into things like the care pathway side of it, and certainly the thing like treatment outcomes, then we're going to begin to need things like outcomes data and follow-up information, which in itself is a major, major challenge. And we're exploring that as a space that might have a problem we could solve. Like the tracking outcomes within software is already a huge challenge, and of course we don't want to burden physicians more. But if we can provide a way to, again, gather that information and harness that information, it's something we're looking at.
Thanks a lot, André. As we have no additional question, I will let you go on this last question.
Sure.
So thanks again for your participation, and thanks to the audience for the question. Don't miss our next session. The Professor François Michaud will present his work on how robotics and telepresence could contribute to digital health. Thank you and enjoy the event.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.